Anyway, a mixed start to the season for Ruben Amorim after he saw his side's encouraging performance against Arsenal undone by an error by his goalkeeper, Altay Bayındır, after he decided to leave out Andre Onana from the matchday squad, despite the fact he was fit. Gary Neville says the club must address this position in this window.
There's a glaring issue for United that can't be ignored, and that is that they do need to find a goalkeeper. They have to. I'm absolutely unequivocal on that. The two that you look at that are, that were mentioned in the last few weeks is Martinez and Donnarumma, and the reason I say that those two would be good goalkeepers for Manchester United is not necessarily because I think they're the best goalkeepers in Europe or that they're amazing. I think they've got big personalities and characters. You've seen Donnarumma in a European final for Italy save those penalties. He looked like a giant. You've seen him play for PSG in huge games under pressure. You've seen Martinez play in World Cup finals and win a World Cup. So they've played under extreme pressure, and they've got big personalities and characters, and they almost walk out with the arrogance and sort of dominance of a goalkeeper. And I think Manchester United, they need that. But I think they need to sort the goalkeeper out, because they will continually concede goals and points, and it undermines what you're doing.
So Gary Neville making it crystal clear that he believes United need a new goalkeeper. Mark, will they sign one?
Well, they'll certainly be hoping that they get a new goalkeeper in this window. Manchester United have to be a little bit conscious of what they spend. They haven't generated a huge amount of money so far this summer with regards to player sales. And that's going to be a big factor, because they've actually spent quite significant sums of money, or, best part of £200 million on the front three. So suddenly to go into the market for a goalkeeper, we know that Gigi Donnarumma is a player that's potentially available. Raw situation for PSG to let go someone who's been so critical to their success. 10 pieces of silverware whilst he's been at the football club. He's got 1 year left on his contract. We had Asmir Begovic on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he said, look, he's made for the Premier League. I know there's a lot said about his ability to play with the ball at his feet, but he's absolutely a top-class goalkeeper. He played with him at AC Milan. It feels like the Premier League is the destination of choice if there is a club that can get to the wage demands that the player has. And when you've got Gary Neville, who knows what it's like to play in front of a key goalkeeper at Manchester United, and how crucial that position is, saying it's vital they go and get someone, you'd imagine that the hierarchy will be working behind the scenes to try and make it happen. But again, players out there, quality goalkeeper that they need, that can do what Ruben Amorim wants. He seems to be very specific on his non-negotiables for players. Good players at Manchester United, if they don't fit into what Ruben Amorim wants, suddenly they don't look like good players, and they're looking at the exit. So this is another situation, one to keep an eye on. There'll be one or two other players in the frame, and of course they had that big investment on Andre Onana. If they can't find a solution for him, if he doesn't play, then that is another problem that they need to address. So there's a few things that need to happen at Manchester United.
Kevin, is Onana good enough to be United's number one, or have we seen enough over the course of the last two seasons that he isn't at the level required for what United hope to be a squad that competes the Premier League and Champions League over the course of the next few years?
He's made a lot of mistakes, there's no doubt about that. I must admit, I am surprised by how it's gone for him, in the sense that when you looked at what he was doing for Inter, he was a big part of them getting to that Champions League final. He played very well in that Champions League final.
His distribution was so good at Inter, but we've not seen that at all at United.
That's the problem. He's gone into a situation at United, like many players have, hasn't been an environment where he can play his best football. He's clearly had a knock to his confidence. In many ways, it's a similar situation to Hojlund. Went there with a good reputation, hasn't been able to perform, has clearly lost the confidence. And when you're at United, which is one of the biggest clubs in the world, every mistake you make is hugely magnified. So I still think there's a top performer in there, but I can understand, with all of the mistakes that he's made, why United might look elsewhere. Whether Donnarumma is that fit is another matter entirely. It's clear he's surplus to requirements. His future at PSG is non-existent now. Once Luis Enrique makes a decision, that's it. And they brought in Lucas Chevalier from Lille. He's the absolute number one. So it's about Donnarumma finding a new club between now and the end of the summer.
And in terms of finding the right club, do you think that United would be the right fit? Or looking at the Premier League clubs out there potentially looking for keepers, is there somewhere else that you think he may end up?
I was stunned to see him linked with Manchester City, in the sense that, as Marcus said, technically he's not amazing with the ball at his feet. I wonder whether somebody like Pep Guardiola looks at that and thinks, well, actually, I can improve that. I can train that up. I can actually change it. He is commanding. He was incredible in the closing stages of the Champions League. Without his performances, they don't come through those really tight games in the Champions League. And we're not talking about PSG as European champions. And, as Mark said, delivered in the European Championship final for Italy as well. It's only mid-20s.
26.
26.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who's been doing it since he was a teenager, hugely experienced. So, yes, a top goalkeeper, but also a keeper that does make mistakes from time to time as well. So while we're going to be back on the wheel, he makes a few mistakes at Old Trafford, they get magnified and we all start again.
It's fascinating because he is only 26 years old, and I think most goalkeepers, when do they get into their prime? 28, 30?
Van der Sar was probably 35 when he was at his best.
Exactly, yeah. So, there's still a long way to go in his journey. And like you rightly say, if Pep can just get that ability with his feet into his game, then he's unstoppable.
There's room for improvement, not just technically, but I think for such a big man, he's not always as commanding as he could be at set plays. PSG have conceded a lot of goals from set plays over the past couple of seasons. He has made some mistakes with routine shots he should have saved, but I do wonder whether he's one of those goalkeepers that actually the bigger the occasion, the bigger the performance, maybe loses concentration a bit in the more run-of-the-mill games, but he's a top performer when he needs to be.
One place to start, that's Manchester United forward Jadon Sancho. He's unlikely to join AS Roma. Roma had made a bid worth £20 million for Sancho, and he spoke to the Italian club, but he's decided to explore other options. Mark, what further details do we have at this stage?
Well, personal terms weren't a problem, but going to Rome clearly was a problem for Jadon Sancho. We know that bid was lodged last week, and the conversation continued between Manchester United and Roma. We know that Jadon Sancho is one of those players that's available and is being courted by a number of sides in Europe. The offer from Roma, like you say, was £20 million, which was around what Manchester United were looking for. I think maybe a little bit more would have been a guarantee to make that deal happen as far as the clubs were concerned. But clearly, being on £300,000 a week and living in Rome wasn't something that Jadon Sancho was interested in. I went to Rome last year. I thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, coffee and ice cream. Who doesn't want that? So the talks now will centre around other opportunities for Jadon Sancho. We know that, what Manchester United are looking for. Clearly, Jadon Sancho has a preference or a plan in his mind. We know that there's that constant link that's existed between Borussia Dortmund and the player. He joined from Borussia to Manchester United, went back there on loan and got to the Champions League final. Could he be going back for a third time, or is there another potential club waiting in the wings to strike now that they know this Roma deal is not happening? The fact that he's turned down the opportunity would suggest he's being told by his people, don't worry about Roma because this club is the one that are going to come next. I don't know.
What do you think happens here, Kev? Because I think Manchester United will be fairly gutted, though, because £20 million, a decent offer there. There's been lots of interest in Sancho in this window, but nothing concrete up until we got that bid in from Roma.
I think if he has passed up and moved to Roma, I actually think he's missed a trick to start with, because he would have been able to work with Gianpiero Gasperini, who's an incredible coach. If you look at the kind of guys that Gasperini has really got a tune out of in the last few years, Sancho fits that mould. Josip Ilicic, Papu Gomez, these are guys that he took not one gear, several gears. So you look at those guys, you look at what he's done with Ademola Lookman. Not always an easy relationship between them, but he's got the absolute best out of Lookman. I think he could have done the same for Sancho. The Dortmund thing's complicated because the briefing in German media has been that they don't have a huge amount of money to play with necessarily, and they've been looking at younger options. They've been looking at guys like Carney Chukwuemeka, maybe another loan for him. They've been looking at Claudio Echeverri at Manchester City. Sancho, they've spoken about positively. Whether that translates into a move, we'll see.
So Sancho's one of a number of players United are open to moving on, including Rasmus Hojlund. Mark, he wasn't in the squad yesterday for Manchester United. He was there at the stadium. Where do we stand on his future?
Yeah, this is another one that it feels like now there's only one outcome, and that will be the departure of Rasmus Hojlund from Manchester United. We know that AC Milan have been in communication with people at Old Trafford with regards to a loan and a possible option on that loan. However, Manchester United want to do a permanent deal. We understand they value the player around £40 million. Now, there has been a sort of softening on his stance. Before, he was very much focused on getting into the Manchester United team, proving to people in Manchester that he was a good buy and he's a top player. However, as things have transcended over the course of pre-season, it's become very clear to the player that game time is going to be very limited, if any. Therefore, particularly when you look at the weekend where he's not involved at all in the matchday squad, he now needs to explore those options. AC Milan being an option. We know that there are other sides in Serie A that are interested in Rasmus Hojlund. There was talks potentially about the option for him to go to Leipzig as a part of that Šeško deal, but that didn't materialise. But it feels like at the moment AC Milan are at the front of the queue with regards to any potential deal with Rasmus Hojlund. But once again, because of that investment from United, they're going to have to get some strong numbers on the table. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So therefore, loans with obligations are going to be more crucial than options.
Does AC Milan feel like a good fit for Hojlund? There's clearly a player there, despite the fact the stats over 2 seasons in the Premier League, 62 appearances, 14 goals, don't quite paint the picture of a player who clearly does have a lot of potential.
Well, he was successful in Serie A before with Atalanta under Gasperini again, underlining his quality as a coach. So that's a league in which he has thrived before. Milan need strikers, so you would think he would definitely get game time. The Leipzig one's interesting because they had a kind of long-held interest in him, but it looks like their replacement for Benjamin Šeško is Romulo, who's a Brazilian guy they've brought in from Turkish football, so that door may well have closed. Ili Taure, the sporting director of Milan, said publicly at the weekend that Hojlund is on their list, so there does seem to be really strong interest there.
Just one thing as well that I think is important to point out is that whilst we say it looks like he's going to depart Manchester United, Ruben Amorim was asked at the weekend after their game with Arsenal about his future and what potentially might happen, and he said he has to fight for his place. We will see what's going to happen. Rasmus has the same characteristics as Benjamin Šeško, so sometimes we need to choose. So whilst he's not saying he's not involved, he said he's got to fight for his place. So it's interesting the manager's stance on that situation.
And United play with Mason Mount as a striker yesterday rather than having a natural option, Rasmus Hojlund, even on the bench, which was